Hello, it's Simon Zutshi here, and in this video, I'm going to share with you how you can acquire your next property literally in the next few weeks, either significantly below market value or using creative finance such as rent-to-rent or a purchase lease option. So listen very carefully. And this is a time-sensitive video. This opportunity will probably be valid for about 3 or 4 weeks after the release of this video. That's why it's really important to make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so whenever time-sensitive strategy videos like this come out, you see them on time to give you time to implement this strategy, because you are going to love this strategy. So here's the concept. So right now in September, all around the country, there are university cities and towns where there is an oversupply of student HMOs. Now, I became a student HMO landlord back in 1998. It was actually my first house I bought a few years before in 95. I lived there for a few years with my friends. I then moved out, bought a second property, and that first property I turned into a student HMO. So I've been an HMO landlord for the last 25 years. HMOs are a fantastic strategy where you rent out individual rooms to people and you get a much bigger rent than you would just renting the property on its own. Now, often you pay the bills and things, but even despite that, you should be making at least £1,000 profit per month from every single HMO. However, when people say HMOs, people think, oh, do you mean student properties? And yes, students is one of 4 different types of tenant you can have in an HMO, but it is just one. But many landlords who have student HMO properties, that's all they know, that's all they've ever done. Now, right now, around the UK, in towns and cities where the universities, I guarantee you in most university towns, there is actually an oversupply of student HMO accommodation. Most students, they go into the hall of residence, university owned accommodation for their first year, and it's in the second and third year they move out into an HMO house with friends they met on their course or from their sports clubs, etc. And what they tend to do is literally in the second term of the first year, i.e. after Christmas, they'll be walking around the student areas to try and secure their student property for the next academic year, which doesn't start until the end of September. So we are now, as I film this video, very close to the start of the next academic year. And yet there are some student properties that haven't got a group of students signed up yet. Now, there are always a few odd students in September looking for accommodation, but the vast majority, probably 98% of students, have already secured their accommodation a long time ago. So imagine this, if there's a student HMO landlord, that might be all they know, and they've got an empty property that's coming up to the start of the academic year, they're going to be pretty worried. They're going to worry that they are not going to find students for the next academic and have an empty property for a whole year. So those people might be very motivated. And if you've read my book, Property Magic, which is an Amazon bestseller, you'll know we always want to work with motivated sellers. It's the first rule of my 5 golden rules. So we can find these student landlords who've got empty properties right now. They're probably not going to find students for this new academic year, and so they think they've got an empty property. They might be very flexible. Now, depending how old they are, how long they've invested, they might be interested in selling that investment property, thinking, well, there's too many student properties now, I might as well sell up. Or they might be interested in just doing a guaranteed rent on that property, in which case we could do a rent-to-rent. Or a combination of the two, we do something like a purchase lease option. Now, a purchase lease option is an incredibly powerful yet misunderstood tool that can give you the ability to control a property. You don't own it, it stays in the owner's name, but you control it, you get cash flow from it, and you get potential equity growth. So in other words, right now, there are landlords with empty student properties close to where you live, and if you reach out to them, you could potentially either buy that property at a discount or secure some other creative finance on that. So here's what you need to do. Go to your local university, they normally have an accommodation office, and find out what are the areas in which the students like to live. They like to live in similar kind of areas, normally clustered around the university. It needs to be very close to the university because students are, what can I say, lazy. They don't have to walk too far. They want to get to lectures on time. And so it needs to be very close to the university. Certainly walking distance, maybe cycling distance. Many students do have cars these days, but don't expect students to get on lots of public transport in order to get to college. They want to be very close if they can. Now, as more and more parents decide to buy properties for their kids at university, all of the accommodation around a university eventually becomes students. One time there was families and old people there, but more and more become students. That means that the nucleus around the university decreases. So the reason a student property might be empty is one of three reasons. First of all, it's now just a little bit too far away from the university. And years ago, it was fine and students were happy to live there. But now, because there's more accommodation available close to the university, this one is a bit too far out. That's why it's not filling. The other thing is maybe the landlord has not kept the property up to the required condition. I don't know if when you were a student, but when I was a student, accommodation was not great. That's not the case now. You would be shocked at the high quality accommodation students live in. And it should be high quality. We should be providing good quality, affordable accommodation for our tenants. But it's very, very high standards. And if the landlord's not kept up to standard, maybe there's better accommodation available, so that's going to fill quicker. Or finally, maybe the landlord did sort out a group of students and for whatever reason, they've fallen out over the summer holiday. Maybe some of them have failed their exams. They're not all going to come back to university. So the group has disintegrated and suddenly the landlord's got an empty property. So sometimes you can find a really good property in a great location. It just happens that that landlord doesn't have any tenants anymore. So you can reach out to them. You can look for the properties in the area that have got to let signs up that are obviously empty. You can go into land registry. You can download the title deeds for just £3, get the home address of the owner and contact them to say, hey, look, I noticed you've got this empty property. Would you be interested in either selling the property or maybe renting it for a guaranteed rent? And the point is to get them to call you to come back, have a conversation. Now remember, at the moment, the rent is nothing. They're getting no income on the property. So they might want to get the full income, but they're not going to get that now. So you can negotiate a rent, if you're doing a rent-to-rent or purchase option, maybe half of what they'd normally get, which means there's enough for them to cover their mortgage, if they have a mortgage, and make some profit, and there's still plenty of profit for you as well. So that's what you do if it's a rent-to-rent or a purchase lease option, or maybe they're just fed up and they want to get out, and you can maybe buy that property at a discounted rate. Now, you can obviously buy that in the traditional way. You can maybe do it with other people's money, doing joint ventures or private finance, or maybe if the seller doesn't need the money, maybe you could do vendor finance, which is where basically the vendor helps fund the deposit for you of the purchase. Now, you can't use vendor finance with traditional mortgage companies. They don't understand it. They want to see you put some of your money in typically, but you could certainly work with bridging companies who understand it, or maybe even get the whole thing 100% financed by the seller. That's a bit more of an advanced strategy we teach on some of our paid training, but I wanted to make you aware of it because it's something that works really well in the current falling market. So that's the strategy. You've only got a few weeks to do this, so make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the bell icon so you get notified of these timely videos. And please like the video. The more people like it, the algorithms will then show more people the video. If you've got any questions or comments about this strategy, please post them below and I'll be really happy to answer them. The one final thing I haven't told you yet that's pretty important is if you take on a student property, of course, you're not going to be able to rent it to students because you've got the same problem as the existing landlord. So what you can do is take the student property and repurpose it to one of the other 3 types of tenants that you get in HMOs, sorry. So the first type of tenants is students in HMOs. The other type of HMO tenant is young professionals. These are people who've been to university, they've got a degree, they've graduated, they're now in a profession like a doctor, an accountant, a teacher, an engineer. They've got a good job, and very often they locate to a new location, a new city for work. So they move somewhere, they don't know anyone. Moving into an HMO is a great solution because they get to have an instant social life as well as living somewhere that's more cost effective than living on their own. And with the recession we're in, with the declining property market, often people can't afford to live on their own in an apartment where they pay the rent and also the bills, because in an HMO generally it's all included. So young professionals is the next type of tenant. The third type of tenant is what we call just people who are working. People, they might work in shops, factory, offices. They've not necessarily been to university. Nothing wrong with that. It's just maybe they haven't lived in a shared house before. They've lived with mum and dad previously. They don't want to live there anymore with mum and dad, or mum and dad don't want them to live there. So they move into a shared house as their next step. They make great tenants, and you can mix working people with young professionals, of course. I wouldn't mix tenants with either of those two groups. And the fourth type of tenant, again, you have them on their own, don't mix them with the first three types. The fourth type is people who are on benefits. People who need a bit of help, a bit of extra support, they're not working for whatever reason. Now, I don't have any of these properties myself that I rent to people on benefits. I have single let properties that I rent to people on benefits, and they're great tenants, really happy. But if you've got an HMO, they are a bit more work, and I don't really want to do that. What a lot of my students do is they will take their HMO and they will rent them on a rent-to-rent basis to a charity who come in and have the expertise to look after that kind of tenant. So in other words, they're providing much needed accommodation for these vulnerable people. They get a really good rental income, but they have none of the HMO management issues. So it can work really, really well. So that's my time-sensitive strategy. I do hope you've enjoyed that. Knowledge is useful, but it's all about implementation. So I really would encourage you to take action, go and look around your local student area right now, reach out, and if you do that, you could secure your next deal within the next couple of weeks. So good luck with that. And one other thing I want to tell you, I am doing some training, some live online training, all about purchase lease options, which is another way you can control some of those properties without having to get a mortgage and without having to put a big deposit in. You should absolutely be using purchase lease options in the current market. They don't work all of the time. There are certain circumstances where they do and certain circumstances where they don't work, but I'm doing some live online training to teach you exactly what you need to use to know to use this incredibly powerful and yet misunderstood strategy in the current property market. So look in the link below this video, come and sign up for that live online training with me and get all your questions answered about purchase lease options and lease option agreements. Until the next time, I encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill. Hey, it's Simon here. I do hope you've just enjoyed that video on YouTube. I hope you took lots of notes and more importantly, you're going to take action. And what I'd encourage you to do is click on the link in the description below the video. I've got some live online training that's very relevant to the video you've just watched. Come and register for that training, join me live online, and you can actually get your questions answered live as part of that training. So take the opportunity to come and join me live online, click on the link below and secure your spot before you miss the date. Take action right now. As ever, I encourage you to invest in knowledge, invest with skill. Enjoy the next video.